am a firm believer that if you are not taking time to reflect on your life and to review what you're doing and where you're going, you're not really in control of your life. You're not creating your life. You're just going wherever the current takes you, and that might not be somewhere you actually want to go. Let's take a look back over the year that was to celebrate our successes, learn a few lessons maybe along the way, and to get ourselves pointed in the right direction for the next year. I have got some key questions that you can ask yourself. Let's go. Hi guys, it's Laura and I help you live a simpler, happier, more spacious life. And at the end of every year, I do an annual review. I'm going to be doing one today to just look back over the year that's just passed and kind of learn all the lessons that I need to learn and really take my time to appreciate the good times, to kind of wrap up or find some sort of closure in the bad times and feel much more prepared and experienced, I guess, for the year that's coming. And the first step as part of that process, always, is to kind of build the picture. It's to reread my story from the previous year. So I look back over old journal entries, but you can also do like old text messages, emails, not that you have to click into each one individually, but just skimming it through the kind of subject lines of the emails that you've received in the past year. Look at your calendar and your to-do list for the things that you were working on, the places that you were going, the people that you were meeting, all the photographs that you took this past year, the social posts that you put up. Particularly for me, like Instagram stories is a good one because I will often just snap kind of quick pictures that just kind of capture a moment of time. I share some little funny stories up there as well, so that's a good one for me. I would highly recommend the journal entry way though, because it's just a much easier way to kind of have everything in one place. If you're thinking that you definitely want to do that in the next year, then highly recommend my digital planner, My Life Story. I'll have a link to it in the description box below, but any sort of planner really, even just a notebook will do. And I don't do long entries. So if that's what's putting you off, you know, the kind of idea of sitting down and having to write out your entire day or what happened or all your thoughts and feelings, that is not the way that I do it. I just keep this beside me, and throughout the day I will just jot down what I'm working on, what projects I finished, something that my daughter said, you know, what the weather is like. Random little things that just kind of make up your life. So that's the first step, rereading your diary entries or looking back through your photographs or wherever and just building up that picture of the past year. Now, as you are doing that, the next thing you're going to be doing is listing out, and you can make a mental note if you want, but I find it's better to actually write them out, and that is all of your successes from this past year. And those can be the big achievements, but also all of these smaller wins along the way. I used to look back over the year that had just passed and have no idea what I had done with my time because I didn't have a written record of it, and my memory is terrible. So I would look back, not remember anything, and then start to believe that I had basically wasted my time, that I hadn't done anything of significance, that I hadn't achieved anything. Whereas now that I'm writing things down, I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I finished up that project, or I, you know, recorded X number of videos, or whatever it may be. There's a written record. But really take the time, even if you don't have those journal entries, take the time now to sit down, and as you're building up that picture, as you're looking back over your photographs and your social posts and stuff, really take the time to appreciate how much you got done this year, how many standout moments there were, and how many of those small little proud moments there were. Something else I find helpful is to actually categorize them. So maybe you have one for, you know, friends and family, all of those standout moments. Maybe you have one for your creativity or, you know, your job or something. Maybe you have a different one for, you know, adventure and travel and things like that. The reason it's helpful to categorize them is that you can start to spot where are the areas where you get the most sense of achievement or satisfaction. Where are the areas that really contribute to your overall happiness and your sense of success? Where was your time best spent? Like, where were you getting the most value, the most bang for your buck? Where were you getting the most sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and enjoyment? You know, what is really contributing to those feelings of success, whatever success means to you? And also, not just kind of where was your time best spent, but who was it best spent with? On top of that, then, what made you feel the most energized? What were those activities that made you come alive, that really lit a fire inside you? It will allow us to make a conscious effort to bring more of those types of things into our lives for the coming year. Let's also look, though, at the lessons that we learned this year. And those could be good lessons, you know, that sprung from something good, or they could be some of those tougher lessons that we learned along the way. Just becoming aware of it first, that is the first step to actually changing the behavior if it needs to be changed. Again, these things are much easier to spot if you do have a planner, if you've got everything written down. I very often notice patterns and kind of routines and behaviors when I'm reading journal entries. For example, last year when I read over all of my journal entries, I noticed that I was constantly tired, and that was having such a big negative knock-on effect on every other area of my life. Pretty much every bad experience I had, not all of them, but a lot of them, came back to the fact that I just was not well rested. I wasn't energized, and I was able to see that very clearly when I just read journal entry after journal entry about how tired I was. Some of them will be lessons that you learned in the moment. So sometimes I will learn a lesson in the moment and I will jot it down. You know, I have a section at the end of each day for reflection, and that is where I write down kind of lessons that I learned or things that I noticed. But they may also be, like was the case with me noticing about the tiredness thing, they may also be lessons that you're only really learning now as you're looking back. Also ask yourself, which are the obstacles that you came across more than once? Sometimes we will come up against an obstacle and it'll be kind of a one and done thing, but there are those obstacles, those things that we repeatedly come up against. Which are the obstacles kind of kept cropping up for you, and either how did you overcome it? So kind of looking back and trying to figure out how you got through that particularly busy time or stressful time, or, you know, that event that really kind of threw you off track, whatever it was. Or how could you overcome it if it cropped up again? Like with the kind of celebration, the success things, it's really great to kind of categorize these lessons learned, because you may be making the same mistakes over and over again, or they may be in one particular area of your life. Something that I noticed last year was that in my head, everything, it seemed like I had a lot of problems, but when I grouped them together, it became very clear that actually all of these things that I thought were different really came down to the same problem. So group them together and ask yourself, what is one thing that would solve or alleviate all or most of these? Figure out as well what and who you no longer want to give your time and energy to. So from the kind of lessons learned, it will probably become clear that there are certain things that aren't serving you, you know, that just aren't adding enough value to your life to warrant keeping them there. And you don't have to feel bad about that. It's very easy to think that you wasted your time. Sometimes you have to just experience that. You know, you can, it's like, you know, when you're a kid and your parents tell you not to do something, but you go ahead and do it anyway. And it's only when the consequences of your actions come back to bite you in the arse that you realize that your parents were right. You know, sometimes we just have to experience a mistake or a failure for ourselves to truly understand it and to truly know that actually, yeah, this is not something I should be doing. So notice it, learn from it, and move forward with that new knowledge. Also ask yourself, what would you do differently? And how would you do that? So again, it's learning that lesson. So if you did kind of come across a similar experience or a similar person or a similar set of circumstances, you would then have the insight to know how to deal with that situation again. You would have that experience to draw from so that you wouldn't end up, repeating that pattern or repeating that cycle. And from those successes and the lessons that you've learned and the patterns that you have spotted, ask yourself, when am I at my best? When do I really shine? What are the situations in which I perform my best, or I get the best result, or just makes me feel the best? Who am I with when I'm at my best? For the next section then, we're going to get a little bit introspective. We're going to turn inwards and we're going to ask ourselves how we feel we have changed as people over the past year. So where were we at the beginning of the year versus where we are now? What journey have we been on? Did we reach our destination? Are we where we thought we would be? And if not, why not? Or if we are, what do we think contributed to us getting there? I feel like I blinked this year, just disappeared. But at the same time, when I think back to me in January, it feels like a complete lifetime ago. I just feel like a completely different person now. Once you sit down and take the time to actually think about that, you realize how much you've changed, rather than the previous me, which, like I said, would just kind of think, oh, that year went by in a blur. Nothing really happened. I didn't do anything of significance. And then I just go on about my life, not really taking that time to understand how and why I have changed along the way. What are you most proud of? Now, speaking of that, let's also look at the kind of destination, where you have ended up. Where am I now? What stage of life am I at? Who is the person that I am now? What are the types of things that I have now? Who am I surrounding myself with now? What is the current lifestyle that I am leading? Is this where I wanted to end up? And if not, what kind of sent me off track? What was the moment, or what were the moments, plural, because generally there are more than one, that made sure that you kind of ended up in a different place? But not only that, ask yourself, was that for the best? Now that you have the benefit of hindsight and you can look back and see how kind of everything slot together, was that detour actually a better road for you to take? Again, it's just being mindful of all of those things that are either contributing to your happiness and your success or detracting from it. Once you become more aware of them, then you can start formulating your plans for how you are going to either incorporate more of the good stuff or eliminate the bad stuff. I find it really helps me, rather than just kind of thinking of where am I now, breaking it down into categories once again, but instead of just trying to take an overall picture, asking yourself, okay, in terms of my health, where am I now? In terms of my relationships, where am I now? In terms of my work or my spirituality, there are so many different kind of areas and facets of our lives. That's a much easier question to ask, rather than just, okay, overall, where am I? What are my habits like? What are my routines like? What are my relationships like? All of those types of things will add up to an overall picture of where you currently are. The reason it's important to get a good read of where you are now is because it will help you in the coming year to see how much progress you're making. If you were running a race, for example, but you had no idea where you started from, it would be really difficult for you to kind of figure out how far you had come. I also want you to let go of worry. This is one of the biggest things that I have got from journaling, probably by far actually. The biggest benefit for me is the fact that I can look back and see that throughout all of the stressful times, the worrying times, the anxious times, I can see now that those are over. They're behind me and I got through them one way or another. So when you are looking back, ask yourself, what were the things that I was worrying about that either never came to fruition or weren't as bad as I thought they were going to be? And that is going to help you moving forward, because you'll realize that you have been in stressful situations before and you have worried about things before that really didn't serve you. There was no purpose to them. Having reread journal entries where I was worrying about something and I thought at the time it's the end of the world. And then I just look back, I'm like, oh, actually now, like 6 months later, that wasn't that big a deal at all. It really helps me when it comes to the next stressful situation, because I know again that someday I will simply be reading about this in my journal. It will just be another entry for me to look back on. What never happened, what wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, or maybe what was kind of stressful at the time but is now over and done with. Ask yourself, how did worrying serve me? What purpose did it play? You know, what benefit did it add to my life? And maybe, like me, you will discover that worrying actually didn't do anything to change that situation except make you feel worse about it. Having that knowledge and having that insight is what is going to make you feel more confident moving forward, knowing that whatever arises, you can tackle it and you can face it head on because you have done it so many times in the past with so many different things. And again, someday that stressful situation that you're facing is just going to be a memory. And then ask yourself, if you could tie up one thing before the end of the year, what would it be? This is a really great question to round out your review, because you have probably put a lot of time and effort into looking at things that you can no longer change, you know, stuff that was in the past, but you've also learned a lot of lessons. Maybe you've gained some new insight, a new perspective on things. So now, when you're looking at how you can wrap up the year, you will have a better idea of the things that you could do that will actually make an impact. Anytime I take the time to sit down and really reflect and review the year that's just passed, that's when I then know what are the things that I can do in the final week or two of the year that are actually going to play a big part and are going to have a big positive impact on my life. It's not about doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. It's doing stuff that will actually contribute in a positive way and will help me end the year on a high note. Now, if you really want that clean slate feeling, then check out my Start Fresh series, where I walk you through different ways that you can tie up all of those loose ends in key areas of your life and your home. Simple steps you can take. Go get that clean slate for yourself, and until next time, go raibh míle maith agaibh. Agus feici mé sibh se go luath. Slán!